I've done mortgages for probably 20 years. I was a landlord previously. I bought my own property, lost those properties. But I've heard of all of these methods. I've heard of the principal only. I've heard of home equity line of credit, which this one sounds very similar to. So I'm just wondering, is there a difference between this and the home equity line of credit? Or is this a completely different approach?
Wow, Miss Simone, you have come at the right time. Just before we get to go away, you come up with this question that I would love to answer that. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right. So here's what we're talking about in the program that you're talking about, which is not our program. Okay. But it started in Australia, where you borrow money from a line of credit and apply it to the mortgage. Okay. I'm just going to give you some round numbers, Miss Simone. Okay. And you tell me if this is what we're talking about. Okay. You ready?
Yes.
So let's say I've got a line of credit at 10%, and I have another loan that is at 6%. I've got a mortgage that's at 6. So I'm going to borrow some of that line of credit money, 10%. All right, 10% money. And then I'm going to use that to help pay down the mortgage at 6%. On the face of that, does that sound like a good idea? Taking 10% money to pay down 6% money?
No.
No, it doesn't. Okay. It only makes sense if we do the math. All right. So you borrow the money from the bank, you borrow $10,000 from the bank at 10%. So in a year, 10% of that, 10% of $10,000 is what? $1,000? Right.
Yes.
Right. So I'm going to borrow that and I'm going to put on my screen so people can see. Okay. I've got a $200,000 mortgage. Okay. I got at 6%. We're going to put that up on the screen there. All right. And so we've got a payment of $1,199.10. If I take $10,000 and put it on this mortgage, do you know it saves me $43,000 in interest, Simone?
Okay.
It knocks off 45 payments. So
Wow.
I borrowed the money, right? And I put it on the loan. See, what we don't know, Simone, is we don't know what happens when we prepay a loan. That's the problem. The problem is we don't know what our benefits are when we do something. How in the world can we live so long, use loans so long that we don't know what happens when we do something? You know, when I step on the accelerator, I know what happens with my car. When I step on the brake, I know what happens with my car. If I turn on the turn signal, I know what happens. All right. But when I put an extra $500 on my mortgage, do you know I don't know what happens? My accountant doesn't know what happens. My real estate agent doesn't know what happens. The person who sold me the mortgage doesn't know what happens when I put an extra $500 on my mortgage. So how could I know? I'm the home buyer. Okay. I'm not the homeowner, because if I was the homeowner, there would be no mortgage because I would own it. I'm a home buyer, but the way the system is built, I'm going to be a home buyer forever. So if I know that by putting $10,000 on this loan, I knock off 45 payments and I save $43,000 in interest. And let's say I don't even borrow the money from the bank, Miss Simone. Let's say I borrow the money from you. I'm going to borrow $10,000 from you. You say, Don, pay me 10%, which is when I pay you back your $10,000, I got to give you $1,000 on top of that. Right?
Yes.
Okay. So now I got to give you back $11,000. Miss Simone, I would make that deal all day. Thank you, Miss Simone, for letting me use your $10,000. You're happy with the $1,000 that you received because that's the contract we made. But I just saved 43 grand on my mortgage with that and knocked off 45 payments. Thank you so very much. So that's using the line of credit method. Okay. Now, that started in Australia. Then Richard Branson picked it up and then took it to the UK and put it in his Virgin Bank. So when he brought it there, he popularized it in the UK. Then we brought it to the US. And then here's the thing. Even though it works and it worked there, no one was really paying attention to how much interest was saved and how much interest was being paid. We just knew that we were in a better situation having done it. but we didn't know how much. So here's my question to you. If this situation works, and it does work, my question is, do you want to save some money, or do you want to save the most amount of money that's mathematically possible for you?
The most amount of money.
Okay, so what we need is, here is the American iteration of this whole system. By the time he gets here, we plug a computer in who does all the math. The computer does all the math, does all the calculations. It says, this is how much money Simone has to work with, because here's how much she spent on groceries. Here's how much she spent on electricity. Here's how much she spent on her cell phone. All right. But she got a deal. She got her. Do you use iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Oh, come on. Amen. All right. Listen, she went to the store. She got her Apple Watch. She got 2 for 1 because of the sale, Black Friday sale. And so we plug all of that information in. And then the computer says, oh, 3 months from now, you should be able to take X amount of dollars out of your savings account, not out of your regular budget, but just out of your savings account, what was left over after you did everything, and then apply that to the debt, as opposed to getting a line of credit to do the same thing. So the line of credit works, but would you much rather say, if I can leverage the money that I have left over after paying my bills, if I can leverage that money to get a 2-to-1 return, a 3-to-1 return, a 4-to-1 return on the money that I have in my savings account, wow, build up my savings and get out of debt in about 7 years. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes, it does.
All right, Mr. Bo, that's what we're talking about. So what this is called is optimization. And if there's any engineers in the audience, they will tell you it is impossible to optimize something if you're not measuring it. You've got to be able to measure in order to optimize. If you're not measuring, how do you know if you can do better if you don't have a baseline on which to compare it to? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Miss Simone, thank you so very much. This question alone was worth the whole time of me sitting here to handle this one question so everybody could understand where this whole thing came from. Started in Australia, migrated to UK, then came back to the US. And do you know that there are people who actually were on this program in Australia, saw our videos online? Do you know now we're helping those people in Australia with this program, because now they're getting a better result because we're plugging a computer into their system, not just leaving them up to guessing how much money to pay.
But Don has some valuable information that can contribute to the quality of a person's life. And it only costs you a few dollars. It's his book. Why not get that?
I'm going to go through the P.I.L.L method myself with some of my investment properties. So I'm going to link up with Don, and then I'm going to sit down with him, show him my investment portfolio, and see how I can eliminate interest.